There's three things in this world that Steve Trang prides himself on: fantasy football, playing poker, and closing deals. Now, unfortunately, he sucked so bad at all three of them, he had to retire from all three of those things. But there is a correlation between playing poker and closing deals. And in this video, we're going to unlock the similarities between those two: playing poker and closing deals.
Raise my hand like a champion, taking the cheers in the ambience. I got a ring, but think then again, I'm such a winner, I'll win again. Some think I'm a Viking or maybe a wizard. I feel like I'm both when I'm in the ring. Victory brings serenity. I give them a three-piece, that's for the three-peat, and then I leave with the trinity. True baller got all the amenities. All the others just wanna be mini-me's. Haters mad when they in my vicinity.
Now, some of you might not know, because I don't really talk about this part of my previous life before getting into real estate, but I was a damn good online poker player. Actually, so much so that at one point in time, I bought my first ever new car with poker winnings, and specifically from online poker. So when I was on Real Estate Disruptors for the third time with Steve Trang, we actually got to talking about us playing poker, closing deals, and the similarities, and it kind of spurred the idea for today's video, because there are a ton of similarities to playing specifically Hold'em poker and closing deals on the phone. Now, I want you guys to understand this. As we go through, there's, I guess the best way to put it, similarities, but I don't want you to get hung up on the fact that playing poker is gambling, because we're definitely not gambling when it comes to closing deals, but to a certain degree, we are. Like, at the end of the day, we are swiping our cards for some sort of lead generation, and there's no guarantee that on the backside of this, there's going to be a win, just like playing poker. Now, if you're consistent with it and you do play the odds and you play correctly, just like if you play the odds in lead generation and you play the odds correctly on closing the deals that you should see a return on that. So let's get into this. First and foremost, you must play the hand that you're dealt to its maximum potential opportunity. Okay, so in poker, you're dealt a hand, and there's odds that come along with this. And it's your job as the player to maximize the potential of that hand. It's the same thing when you're dealt leads. You're going to get leads that are full retail. You're going to get the lay down leads, and then you're going to get a lot in between. The ones that are kind of motivated, they need to sell for a discount. And it's your job to go through that and identify which ones you should be closing and which ones you shouldn't. However, every time you get a lead, you should be going in it with the expectation that this is the lead that you're going to close. Just this past week, I posted a video where it says I'm calling my shot like Babe Ruth. Well, that actually came from you guys in the comments saying, dude, I love how you speak it into existence. You're calling your shot like Babe Ruth, because right before I bought those leads, I said, this is going to be the one. I'm going to close this deal. It's the same thing in poker. Hey, this is the hand. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to win this hand. It's not a guarantee, but you're going into it with the expectation that you're going to win. So it's your job to play the hand and maximize its potential. The next thing is play the odds. All right. When you're playing poker, what separates the winners from the losers is not always getting dealt pocket aces. It's how do you deal with the somewhat mediocre hands? How do you deal with 7-8 suited? If you're on the button, you should be aggressive with it. If you're not, if you're in the wrong position on the table, maybe you should just fold. Play the odds. Don't invest anything into it and wait for a better hand. It's the same thing when you're talking to sellers. At times, you need to play the odds and make sure that you're getting the deals that are more than likely going to make it to the closing table. How do you do that? Utilizing the profit calculator that we have available for you guys. We go in, we determine, hey, this is the after repair value that we're seeing based off the information provided by the seller. This is the repairs that are needed. Reverse engineering it with the holding and closing costs. And what we're seeing, we're building a bridge that based off of the odds, this is more than likely going to be a deal that can be disposed and make it to the closing table. That's not always the case. In our case, it's about 65 to 70% of those deals that we lock up under contract actually make it to the closing table. But we're playing the odds. We're trying to get ourselves in a position where the vast majority of those are actually going to make it based off the information provided for us. It's the same thing in poker. You get a hand, you have an idea of whether or not your hand is a winnable hand based off of how your opponents are playing, what's on the board, and just kind of the activity. So moving away, don't give away your hand too early. This is one of those things that I see because I regularly preach, like, hey, embrace no when you're talking to someone. It's rule number one in the closer's formula. However, that being said, sometimes it can be easy to try to just rush to a close, not ensuring that you've covered all the basics of the sellers. It can also be easy to rush to a no without asking enough questions because you're like, well, RJ said embrace no. Deploy patience when you're on the phone, just like you need to deploy patience when you're playing poker. Make sure before you make a decision, you have all of the information that can be available to you before you make that decision. So, for example, yeah, we want to embrace no and we want to be efficient on these phone calls, but there's times that we need to ask one or two extra questions just to make sure that there's not additional motivation and there's not something that's going on with the seller situation that could make this be a deal that needs to be sold at an extreme discount. So don't give up on your hand too early. Deploy patience, ask solid questions, and really make sure that you have all of the information that's available to you before you make a decision. The other thing is, just like in poker, when you have to be able to read your opponents and understand when they're bluffing, when they're not, you have to be able to read a seller. Good example of this is when you call a seller and they basically say, I want full retail. Now, a lot of times when we ask for the price early on, that's not necessarily the price that they're willing to sell it for. It's just the price that they would like to have. So when you go into it and you start asking questions and you start finding out that maybe there's a physical distress element, maybe a financial distress element, that's where you'll see a seller, through you asking solid questions, start price dropping themselves down because you are reading what's going on in the situation by asking questions. Now, in poker, you don't really get to ask someone questions. I mean, you can talk at the table, but you can also just see their mannerisms. And it's the same thing here. Is a seller talking quickly? Are they slowing themselves down? Are they employing patience themselves? You can read the seller and really understand, because what are the two most important things when we're talking to a seller? Understanding their price and understanding their motivation for wanting to sell. How do we decipher that? Through the questions, and then actively listening to what they're saying and asking the next 2, 3, 4 questions that follow up that answer. That's what really lets us find out how motivated they are to sell that property. You have to listen to them and find out what's important to them. Otherwise, you're going to be building that meaningless rapport throughout the conversation when you really need to be finding out what is the most important thing to them and hammering the conversation down that path and then solving that problem with buying their real estate. In poker, this is like when someone has a hand and they start acting aggressive with betting. This could mean one of two things. They're trying to bluff you out of the hand, or they really have a good hand and they're just going to dominate you and try to take all of your chips. You have to decipher that, just like when you're talking to a seller. Is this person truly motivated, or are they not motivated at all and they actually want full retail? Great example of this is when I'm on the phone with a seller, how'd you come up with that price? That one question right there, more often than not, lets me understand if they're truly wanting that number or if it's just a number that they felt like they were supposed to say. Normally, when I get the answer of, it's what I saw on Zillow, that means that's not the number that they actually need. It's just what they feel like they're supposed to say because it's what the internet told them. All right. The other thing is, in poker, you can't get thrown off when someone raises you unexpectedly. Same thing when you're talking to sellers. Times where even on inbound PPL leads, you call a seller and you say, hey, you still looking to sell that property? How much are you looking to get for it? And all of a sudden, they'll be distant or aggressive, maybe even angry on the phone. A great example of this was during the initial 50-50-50 challenge. I've got this video up. It's Cussed Out to Contract. That's the name of the video. I sent a text message to the gentleman's deceased wife. Not intentionally. It's just what was skip traced, and the public records had not been updated. And so when I sent the text, it had her name and asked her if she wanted to sell the property. So he called me and he was infuriated, like beyond upset. How dare you ask my wife? She's dead. And he called me an ignorant motherfucker and hung up on me. Now, I could have gotten thrown off by this. I could have just given up on that. However, the information that was provided to me was, as I saw that the property was vacant, it was in pre-foreclosure, and it was tax delinquent. All signs of a massively motivated seller. And then he also just told me that his wife had passed away. Well, sure enough, I had to double dial that seller, get him back on the phone, and then explain. I'm reaching out to you because I saw the property was vacant and it's under pre-foreclosure and it's tax delinquent, and I did not mean to trigger you. However, I could be a solution for you. And once I explained that to that seller, he lowered his guard and he said, man, I'm so sorry. It's just, she was the love of my life. And it's hard for me to deal with that right now. But I do need to sell the house. I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose everything that we had. And because I didn't get thrown off by that initial reaction by the seller, that led to us being able to help that seller and close that deal for him. This is the important thing when we're talking to sellers, is that it's not about you. So don't let your emotions get involved when talking to sellers. I know it's difficult. It's not fun to get called an ignorant motherfucker or get hung up on, or when someone gets aggressive or angry with you for whatever reason. But you have to understand, you are talking to people that are motivated to sell one of the biggest assets in their life for a discount. Of course, there's going to be a lot of emotion coming from them. So it's your responsibility to not match that. Stay calm, stay cool, stay collected, and keep your end result in mind, taking care of the seller by buying their real estate. The next thing is, you cannot go on tilt when things are not going right in your business. The day in New York during the 2023 50-day challenge, perfect example. No one answered the phone. Voicemail after voicemail after voicemail. Another day that comes in mind, South Carolina. The day before South Carolina was Rhode Island, one of the best days during the 50-day challenge. Banger call after banger call, some of the just craziest calls. Some of the most motivated sellers during the entire 50 days was during Rhode Island. During South Carolina, all very negative phone calls, including a realtor blowing up a deal. But you have to understand, that's just part of playing the game. Just like in poker, you're going to take some bad beats. You're going to dominate someone, and they're going to push all in, and you're going to call, and then you're going to lose on the river. It's just part of the game. Same thing here. You could do the exact same thing that you did the day before. They gave you 4 to 5 contracts, and the next day end up with -1 contract because a realtor blew it up. Now, you can't let your emotions allow you to go full tilt and impact you being consistent within your action taking, you being consistent with swiping the card and continuing to generate more and more leads. You cannot allow that to happen, because this is what will differentiate you from your competition, is that on the bad days, you keep going. You fight through that without going full tilt, and you stay consistent. And the last thing is, what I was just talking about. Focus on consistency over the long haul. Playing the game correctly, making sure that every single time you're on the phone with a seller, you're going through the closer's formula and you're having the appropriate conversation. You're maximizing your opportunity and you're playing the odds and you're running your numbers on the profit calculator. And you're never allowing your emotions to get involved where you could potentially lose out on a deal. You're not getting thrown off when someone raises you. You're not going full tilt because, hey, voicemail after voicemail, or someone blows up a deal or you lose a deal. You stay consistent with your actions. This will be what leads to consistent results. And I know that sounds simple. You're like, man, RJ, you keep simplifying things and it sounds so easy, but I can't do that. You're wrong. You can't do that because you're convincing yourself that you can't do that. I've seen it time and time again between people coming to the Crucible and now being a part of Titanium University. We see people that come in, even in the worst of situations, when they take that consistent action, whether it's through the lead generation, the closing process, the comping and underwriting, dispositions, whatever it is, the people that consistently take action are the ones that consistently win. Just like when you're playing poker, if you're consistent with how you play your hands and you're playing the odds and you don't go full tilt and you don't let your emotions get involved, those are the ones that win a lot more money. This is why great poker players really don't like to play tournaments. They like to play cash games because over the course of time, they're going to win so much money in the cash game that that's where they eventually become the bullies at the table and dominate. That's where you need to be as a wholesaler. That consistency, the consistency of your lead generation, the consistency of closing deals. You become the bully in your market and no one else can compete with you. Now, at the end of the day, everyone let Steve Trang know that I'm a better closer than him and a better poker player. Drop that in the comments. Give me a like. Hope you enjoyed today's video. We'll see you guys tomorrow with King Closer Reacts.